Later, during the wheat harvest, Samson went to visit the young woman he thought was still his wife, taking along a young goat as a gift, and said to her father, I want to go into my wife's bedroom. I want to go into my wife's bedroom. You can't do that, he replied. When you left so abruptly the way you did, I thought you were divorcing her, which is quite easy for a man to do in these days. So I arranged for her to marry one of the young men who were at your party. But my younger daughter is even prettier. You can have her as your wife if you'd like. This time I have good reason to crack some Philistine heads. He's not impressed. Some undefined amount of time passes and the wheat harvest season arrives, which means it was around late May or early June, the time of the set-apart celebration of Shavuot, Pentecost. Samson's anger finally had subsided sufficiently that he decided he would go back to Timnah to see his wife. What was he angry about? His wife-to-be had betrayed him, told them what the riddle was, and he'd gone and murdered 30 people, so he was off his face clearly. He settled down and he's gone to see his wife. Why would he be bringing a goat? Why would it have been considered important enough to include the gifting of this goat in this account? Why do we have to know about the goat? It is usually taught that the young goat was a present of reconciliation. And while possible, it is hard to imagine that such a common and rather inexpensive item would have been suitable to apologise for the tremendous insult and boorish behaviour that Samson had displayed several months earlier at his own wedding. Instead, there is another and much more likely possibility. There is an ancient Middle Eastern custom, which is still practiced today by some Middle Eastern cultures, called tzedikah. It was, and still is, followed by men who have no permanent habitation, and so their wife is allowed to remain with her parents on a more or less indefinite basis. So the wife stays with the parents because the husband doesn't have a home. This tzedikah is probably an evolution of the concubine relationship, whereby a man takes a woman to live in his household, but she is not given a marriage certificate or marriage. She's not married under the kuppah or given a wedding ceremony. Yet she does have many rights of a wife. And in this system, it is the husband's duty to bring the wife a gift each time he comes to visit her, which is clearly what Samson's doing. It wasn't an apology gift because it would have been a small gift for what he did. It's just a gift because every time you went and visited your wife in this tzedikah system, you'd bring a gift. It doesn't have to be a real valuable gift, but it can't be so small as to be insulting. A goat kid would fit that bill just about right in that era. So in our case with Samson, he says, I want to go to my wife in her room. And no man would be allowed to enter a single woman's private chambers, nor could a married woman have a male visitor other than her father or husband in her own room. Such a thing just wasn't done and could easily bring the death penalty for violators, both for the visitor and the visitee. So Samson obviously thought that he had some kind of marital relationship with this girl, probably of the tzedikah kind, but the father thought otherwise. Seeing that Samson was surprised and upset and certainly not wanting to further his anger, this renowned man of violent and impulsive behaviours didn't want to rile Samson up. So the father offered the girl's younger sister to him. She's even prettier, he says. Why not take her as a nice trade? The father wasn't making a sincere attempt to make things. The father was making a sincere attempt to make things as right as he could under the circumstances. Of course, Samson wasn't having any of it, and another rage overcame him. Don't make the Samson angry. So Samson went out and caught 300 foxes. 300, he had to catch them. He tied them together in pairs with oil-soaked rags around their tails. There you go. Tied their tails together in pairs with oil-soaked rags on their tails. Then he took the foxes into the Philistine wheat fields that were ready to be harvested and set the rags on fire and let the foxes run wild through the fields. And all the wheat fields went up in flames, and so did the stacks of wheat that had already been cut. Even the Philistine vineyards and olive orchards all burnt up. How about that? That's like going through Main Street of your town and burning down all the shops, burning down all the businesses, burning down everybody's livelihood. Now understand, just like any ancient society, these fields of grain were the livelihood of the common folks. And while these folks were indeed Philistines, who Yahusha ultimately wants removed from the promised land, they weren't monsters. They were simple farmers. Much of the wheat crops that he didn't want them out because of their profession or their behavior in a sense. It was because of their idolatry and who they chose to worship. So it was kind of their behavior, but they weren't, you don't just think they're savage barbarians. Everybody in this area is. They're just simple farmers. They're just living normal lives like you are, like the neighbor next door who's an unbeliever to you is. Everyone's living, just making a living. Much of the wheat crops that they depended on were now destroyed. In addition, it was common to plant wheat among olive trees, so many of the olive groves were also burnt down. Interestingly, unlike some of his early adventures, we don't find any reference to Samson being given divine strength and influence to set these fields on fire. No, you did that all on your own, mate, because you angry. You got anger issues. Let me have sex with my wife in her bedroom. I want her. Get her. I thought you hated her. I gave her to your best man. Her younger sister is more attractive. Take her instead. He's not having it. Put the foxes together. Who did this? Samson. Then some of the Philistines started asking around who could have done such a thing. It was Samson, someone told them. He married the daughter of that man in Timnah. But then the man gave Samson's wife to one of the men at the wedding. So the Philistine leaders went to Timnah and murdered Samson's wife and her father. It wasn't technically his wife, but it's that woman that he was supposed to marry. That's the point of the story, is his wife. And her father as well, burning them to death. So when Samson found out what they'd done, he went to them and said, You bastards killed them. I won't rest until I take revenge on you. You're dead meat. Then Samson started hacking them to pieces with his sword before leaving Philistia and going to live in the cave at 𝕭𝕐. He was stewing in a cave. But it wasn't long before the Philistines invaded Judah and set up a huge army camp at 𝕭𝕗. What a name, 𝕭𝕗. Where do you live? I live at 𝕭𝕗. Samson belonged to the Dan tribe, but his hideout in the cave at 𝕭𝕐 was in Judah, a few miles southwest of Bethlehem. The people of Judah asked, because the Philistines have now invaded Judah, so now the people of Judah asked, Why have you invaded our land? Philistines said, We've come for Samson. We're going to do the same thing to him that he did to our people. And 3,000 men from Judah went to the cave at 𝕭𝕐 and said to Samson, Don't you know that the Philistines rule us, and they will punish us for what you did? I was only getting even with them. They started it. They did it first to me. We came here to tie you up and turn you over to them, said the men of Judah. I won't put up a fight, but you have to promise not to hurt me yourself. We promised, the men said. We will only tie you up and turn you over to the Philistines. We won't kill you. Then they tied up his hands and arms with 2 brand new ropes and led him away from 𝕭𝕐. And when the Philistines saw that Samson was being brought to their camp at 𝕭𝕗, they started shouting and ran towards him. But Yahusha's spirit took control of Samson. Because remember, Yahusha wants to cause conflict in this land with the Philistines, because he wants them out of the land. So this is the beginning of the conflict. The conflict's been going for ages. But the real beginning of the conflict that Samson's raising up with the Philistines, something that David is going to finish later on. So this is Yahusha working, sowing seeds of discord and chaos and anger and war and hatred. So Yahusha's spirit took control of Samson and he broke the ropes as though they were pieces of burnt cloth. And Samson glanced around and spotted the jawbone of a donkey. This is why the town was called Jawbone, obviously, because Samson picked up a jawbone of a donkey which had not dried out yet, so it was still hard and heavy. There it is, the jawbone there. Picks up a jawbone, grabbed it and started slaying Philistines left, right and center with it. And he killed 1,000 of them. One man killed 1,000 men. Takes you long enough to count to 1,000. Imagine killing 1,000 men. After the fighting was over, he made up this poem about what he had done to the Philistines. I used a donkey's jawbone to kill 1,000 men. I beat them with this jawbone over and over again. I used a donkey's jawbone to kill 1,000 men. I beat them with this jawbone over and over again. Woohoo! The jawbone song. Samson tossed the jawbone on the ground and decided to call the place Jawbone Hill, and it's still called that today. Samson was so thirsty and exhausted that he spoke to Yahusha. Master Yahuwah, you helped me win a battle against the whole army. Please don't let me die of thirst now. Those heathen Philistines will carry off my dead body. Samson was tired and weary, but Yahusha sent water gushing from a rock, and he drank and felt strong again. So Samson named the place Call a Spring, because he had called out to Yahusha for help, and the spring is still there at Jawbone. And Samson was a leader of Israel for 20 years, but the Philistines were still the rulers of Israel. So, look at him. Killed 1,000 men. In a rare moment of proper spiritual clarity, Samson acknowledges that it was Yahusha who won this battle and who observed it was Yahusha who won. In a rare moment of proper spiritual clarity, Samson acknowledges that it was Yahusha who won this battle and who preserved his life in what only seemed to be a one-man fight against staggering odds. He says to Yahusha that he is grateful that Yahusha has seen fit to accomplish such a great rescue through his servant. But while Samson was quite aware of his calling as a Nazarite for life, so calling himself Yahusha's servant, and as Yahusha's tool to begin to liberate Israel from the Philistines, he was probably by far the most untrustworthy and disobedient of all the judges and paid only lip service to his Yahusha established status as a Nazir. So we're going to, this was supposed to be one page all up, but it was very long and full of so many gems. So we're going to end there and pick up in our next episode the rest of Samson and of course Delilah, the well-known story, because that's been long enough today. So stay strong, guys. You can see, I mean, look in this era here. I'm running with the same theme. If you want Yahusha close, you've got to be obedient. You've got to have him. We had a video in our house last night. Christopher was talking to us with the kids. If you want the superpowers, you know, supernatural powers to come through you, the maturity, the gifts of the Ruach, the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, and other amazing gifts, and watch Yahusha do things in your life, you've got to draw near to him, and he wants to draw near to us. That's why he died for us, shed his blood, opened a portal on our hearts, gave us the seed, as I've been talking about, which we have to feed and grow and invest the talents and make them grow, you know. And are these guys interested in doing that? No. And that's why Yahusha's not even among them. He's coming in after a few years here and after a few years there to achieve his purposes. But how long do these scriptures go for? Hundreds and thousands of years. We don't want to wait that long. We want Yahusha to come back. So it's time for us to overcome and mature. Guys, be transformed. Allow him to move, you know. So that's enough for today. We'll finish the story of Samson next time. See you later.